I announced on the temple's Facebook group for this class that we're going to pause our study of the Lotus Sutra and take up the study of the medicine Buddha Sutra for specifically because of the pandemic and the resurgence of the pandemic. So I apologize for sort of pausing our study of the Lotus Sutra that's been ongoing. We will continue, but I'm hopeful for a time that we can put our energy into a practice specifically related to the pandemic and people suffering. We have many examples of suffering around the world at the moment, not the least of which is the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. But one of the things that I've noticed is not only do we have pandemic related to the actual illness, but also I've been contacted by numerous people just incredibly frustrated with the disinformation, misinformation, just dealing with the situation overall. And I think the sutra is a good way to help with these various issues and concerns that we're having. It's rare that, in a strange way, that we get to practice a sutra that's so relevant. So part of the sutra is, when there is a pandemic, when there is tremendous illness, it should be lectured, right? It should be taught, it should be recited. So responding to that's part of what we're going to take up starting this evening. I'm also going to start this is going to be interactive. So we're going to have a little project. And that's going to be recitation of the mantra. So I'm going to ask everyone to recite the mantra and then report the number of recitations they've completed each week. And we're going to see if we can, as a group, get to 1 million. And then if we hit 1 million, let's see if we can go more than that. My thinking is if we can do 1 million, then we've said, as a group, we will have recited one mantra for approximately every 7,600 people. So we've got about 7.6 billion people on Earth. If we can recite more than that, that's good. But in the midst of the resurgence of the pandemic and I think a lot of additional suffering that has stemmed from that, this is a good time to teach this practice and as a group try to engage in the practice. Thank you, Jamie, for sharing the sutra in the chat. We will, also thanks to Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai, BDK, they have translated the sutra, and as with many of the teachings, provided a copy on PDF that's free of charge. So just for ease of access, we'll be using that version. There are other, of course, because of the popularity of this practice in Asia, there are many temples that have copies available also. So if you have those, know of them, have access to them, I welcome people to bring those in. I will be referencing other translations also, as well as the original, the translation in Chinese from Sanskrit, so that we can clarify some of the terms and ideas as we go forward. As you'll see, the Medicine Master Sutra is not as long as, for example, the Lotus Sutra, but there's a lot packed into it because it's primarily focused on practice. There is less Buddhist philosophy in terms of science of the mind or understanding, how we got into this predicament, and it is much more directly focused on alleviating the various illnesses that we encounter in this life. And those are psychological, physical, societal. As you'll see, there's a tremendous amount of detail in the sutra in terms of practice. The sutra is also very detailed in terms of the practices that we should engage in, and tells us why. In many ways, it's very clear cut. So this has contributed to its popularity also. And it's one of the major practices that's done during a pandemic. When I first studied the sutra, if anyone had told me we would actually be in a pandemic, I wouldn't have believed them. I thought that was just something that we learned in our history books. But here we are, and sadly, it doesn't seem to be abating, and both because of people's unwillingness to receive care and other countries where there's inadequate care, the virus keeps mutating. So where I thought we by now would be coming out of this, or at least hoped, looks like we're going to be in this for a long time. So here's my thought. This is what's kind of interesting about the sutra. Just before the pandemic, the temple, we ordered several new statues. And one of those is the Medicine Buddha statue. The delivery was, as the statuary was being made for us, the pandemic began, and the workshop, the carvers could not come in to complete the carving because of COVID. So the carving was delayed, as well as the painting. So each person who was working on the statuary had to come in separately to work in the workshop by themselves so that they could do so safely. And then, of course, shipments from Asia greatly delayed by the pandemic also. So we received the statuary far later than we expected. And then as things began to shut down here, we took the opportunity to do renovations at the temple, thinking, things that would be inconvenient when we're having ongoing services. If we have to close anyway, this is a good time to do some of that construction. So for all these various reasons, we haven't actually installed enshrined the new Medicine Buddha statue. So I'm going to ask everyone to take part if you want to, and we're going to try to recite the mantra, and then with the new statue, we'll enshrine everyone's name who contributed to this practice, so that we don't just have the new statue in the temple, but we also generations from now, people can look back and see all of us engaged in the practice for the benefit of people all around the world, and hopefully be inspired by that also. So we've set up our web master extraordinaire. Jamie is helping to tally the mantra count. So we'll be keeping track, and then we'll have everybody doing this. At the same time that I'm asking you to do the mantra practice, I'll be doing the full Medicine Buddha ritual, and consecrating the statue as we go through, so that all of our practices will be concentrated in the new statue. And as we go forward, we'll of course include everybody, show you the statue and things like that. So one of the questions in the comments was, someone says they have a small Tibetan version of the Medicine Buddha. Yes, you can use any image that you have or that you find. That is completely okay. just because we are historically a school of Buddhism based in Japan, shouldn't limit you to one style of art. In fact, what we're going to do tonight, I'm just going to go over an outline of the sutra. We're going to go over the mantra and talk a little bit about the imagery for the Medicine Buddha. For a few reasons, I don't expect that everyone's going to have a statue or painting at home. So we'll go over the imagery so that you have in mind what the iconography is and the meaning. And then also when you're doing the practice, you can keep that in mind. So that'll be, and one of the questions in the comments is, is there any way for those who aren't in the area to contribute to the installation? We did, when I ordered the statue, initially we did have some people contribute financially. So that was good. Right now, what we're going to be working on is the zushi, sort of the box the statue will be finally installed in. So that has to be constructed. So trying to ship all of that from Asia was a little too much. So we just have several new statues, and it's incumbent on us to build the new altar space here. So whenever there's saws and hammers, it's better to wait until those things are done to bring your statuary into the space. So this will be our setting the intention for that eventual installation. In terms of the mantra practice, as we go through tonight and kind of go over the outline of the sutra, it is very practice focused. As such, all of us, I'm hoping, will be focused on the practice and really, I think, working to expand our compassion for all of the people who are suffering from, there's so many dimensions to this pandemic. Maybe as a group, we can determine how long we want to do the practice, even after the new statuary is enshrined. I'm happy to keep this going. As a preliminary matter, just to get an idea, time myself reciting the mantra. So if you have a juzu, reciting 108 times takes about 2.5 minutes. So one of the key components of the Medicine Buddha Sutra is the Buddha's vows, and those vows are critical. So you don't have to decide right now, but knowing that it takes about 2.5 or 3 minutes to recite 108 times, try to make a vow for how many times you'll recite each day. It can be however many you want. So please keep in mind right now, this is not a competition. This is only our gratitude both to the teaching and practicing our compassion towards everyone. So we will try to get to as high a number as we possibly can. Someone whose math is better than mine can figure out the calculation, how long it would take to do 1,000 or 10,000 or more. But we'll try to go for weekly totals. So maybe get a sheet of paper and just keep track. If your vow was to recite 50 times, and then report 50 times a day for a week, and whatever that tally is. If you skip a day, something comes up, see if you can double up the next day to make up for it. So we'll do like weekly totals. You have to go away for the weekend, try to make up for those 2 days, whatever is coming up. So whatever your vow is, it's most important to fulfill the vow. So don't vow, I'm going to recite 1 million times a day, because that leaves no time for you to eat or sleep or drink water. The most important point is achieving the vow. So please make it reasonable, attainable, something that is not going to exhaust you. So please keep that in mind. It is not a competition. All of us together are going to pool our energy, and I'm sure we can get to 1 million. If I were to do 10,000 a day, it would take 100 days to get to 1 million. So I'm fairly confident we can get to 1 million quickly in the grand scheme of things. So when we get to that point, we can see if we want to keep going to 2 million, 3 million, 10 million, or one time for every person on Earth, 7.6 billion plus. At any rate, that should be our goal. We should be setting in our minds that we are reciting for all sentient beings, not just the ones we like, not the ones just in our neighborhood, not just the ones that appear friendly to us, but for all. So that's my hope as we go forward. I have you guys over here, so I'm just checking the chat. Okay. So today we're going to go through the outline, imagery, and we'll go over the mantra. And then next week we will start to get into the details of the sutra. The sutra is not long. You can read it, what can I say? You can read it comfortably over the course of a few hours or a couple days. It is not a very long text. There's a lot of detail packed into it. So we will try to unpack it and answer questions as we go through it. But I think it's helpful as we engage in the practice to also study. So study and practice should be connected in Buddhist thinking. The other thing I'd like people to keep in mind, you will see there is a section on practice in the sutra. One of those practices is, of course, copying the sutra. We will talk more about that. So if you want to read and reread the text as we go over the next few weeks, I welcome you to do that. So Buddhist texts are not something where you say, oh, I read it once. Really engaging with the text. How we engage with text is different than maybe how you engage with a novel or other written material. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well.
Sensei, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Are you referring to the document you posted in the group, The Scripture of Master of Medicine?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. That's a very easily accessible version. I admit I have a lot of books, so I actually had a bound copy, and now I'm hunting around which bookshelf I put it on. So when I locate it, I'll show you that one also. Most of the other versions that I'm aware of have come from different temple groups in China, Japan, and Taiwan. So there may be others out there, but the BDK version is the one that I'm most aware of in terms of publishing. There are a host of reasons for that, but I think because the text is so practice focused, it tends to, come out of practitioner communities. So the BDK version is good. Because this is such a practice focus and has less, convoluted philosophical doctrine, it's not probably not as difficult to translate, where you see a lot of variation. So, but again, when we are reading things in translation, I always think it's helpful if there are other translations. It's good to view some of the other translations also. Oh yeah, somebody mentioned CTTB, City of 10,000 Buddhas. There's a translation from Master Shuanghua. That is a very good commentary translation. So that's the Chinese school out of mainland China, actually. Master Hua is originally from the area that I lived in Northeast China. So that's a very good and detailed commentary. And I believe City of 10,000 Buddhas is also published a copy. I believe that's the other copy I have. So they have a published version also. So there are a few that are available if people are interested. I'm sure Medicine Buddha is very popular in Japan. That is also the case in Tibet. So although I'm not sitting here right now, I'm not aware of a Tibetan Buddhist group that has translated it. I'm fairly sure that someone has, and so that's probably available also. The reason I recommend looking at different translations, when translations were done early on in China, many of them were done by committee. These days, it's usually one person working alone doing the translation. So if you've ever translated something, you understand the difficulty of translation. If you've done it by yourself versus worked, in a group on translation, you'll understand maybe how the work product is different. Just the thought given to the nuance of words and potential alternative meanings or connotations. So it's helpful sometimes to just compare translations to see if there's a particular sense that may not have been intended. Reading another translation may give you clarity. Easier to read several translations than to learn classical Chinese, I think. So, okay. So are there any questions before we kind of go into the outline of the sutra? Or did I miss any comments here? Let's see. No, okay. And yes, Christina, thank you. The Yakushi Nyorai is the Japanese name for the medicine Buddha. Master of medicine master is a little bit closer to the sutra title. Here's our little outline for today. So first, we're going to go over some of the iconography imagery that you're more likely to see with Medicine Buddha. And the image here is from a very famous temple in Japan, Shin Yakushi temple in Nara. And so this is one of the more classic forms of Yakushi, which is giving the mudra of fearlessness and holding the medicine pot. So hopefully you can see my mouse here. The pot in the left hand is actually a container for medicine. And then the right hand, this is the mudra of fearlessness, right? So taking away the fear. So this is a pretty common version. In Tibet, the iconography is a little different, so I will show one of those also, but this is the most common style. So the style that we'll be enshrining at the temple is this style. So here you see, of course, as a Buddha, rather than a Bodhisattva, as a Buddha, wearing the basic monk's robes, completely unadorned, no jewelry or anything like that. So if you see statuary with a lot of implements, jewelry. Usually they're bodhisattvas, but this plain monk's robe, sitting in meditation is generally depicting one of the Buddhas. And then surrounding, we'll talk about this later, surrounding the medicine Buddha, it depends on the text. There is the medicine Buddha text. There is also, there are some practice texts that describe the medicine Buddha, but generally you'll see the medicine Buddha surrounded by the 12 heavenly generals, yaksha generals. So we'll talk a little bit about that also. And then there's 2 bodhisattvas that are usually shown flanking him. So that's also in the sutra. This is the Tibetan style of displaying. So the mudra is slightly differently. So the specifics of his iconography are actually somewhat described in the sutra, but not specifically. So you'll see differences in terms of the how the medicine pot is displayed. So these are just cultural interpretations. The medicine Buddha is described as having this blue color. So in Japan, there's a preference for using wood to make statuary and then painting wood or leaving it unpainted. This is very much a bit of a Shinto perspective. And then later on, technologically, they tended to make statuary out of dry lacquer. So this is just the materials that were available. In Tibet, they would use thangkas, the painted scrolls, or metal statuary. And again, this is largely more to do with the materials that were available in each culture. If you've never been to Tibet, Tibet is above the tree line, so they don't have wood to do carving. So they were using more metal. And then if you've ever seen the sand mandalas being made, it's actually not sand, it is crushed stone. And so that color is actually the color of the stones. So in order to make paint, you need water. Guess what else is very rare in Tibet? Water. So they adapted a lot of the artistic forms to the materials that they had available. So you'll notice in Tibetan tradition, most of the statuary is metal, because you could find, of course, in the mountains, metal to be worked. And of course, in Japan, large trees like cedars and whatnot are more abundant. So that's the material they worked with. And they brought over a lot of the painting traditions from China. So there's not, one is correct or one's incorrect. It's, what people had available in terms of ancient technology. The slide back up. So what's good about the Tibetan version is, of course, the coloring. And then you'll see this plant here in the pot. And these are the medicinal herbs. There is specificity with regard to the herb. You can actually find the herb in Vedic medicine. And so this herb is a type of stomach medicine. So a lot of illness in the old days was due to poisoning, indigestion, discomfort in the stomach. So the herb here described is one of those medicines that would sort of balance the body. So both in traditional Chinese medicine and Vedic medicine, there are a lot of herbs that are sort of, the first things that are given to people to address illness and discomfort. So that's the herb that is coming out of the pot. So you'll see this in different formats. Sometimes it looks like a grouping of leaves. Here it looks like a little plant, but that's what's being described. So this is, of course, emphasizing the literal medicine that's in the pot that the Buddha is holding. That's medicine that we need in order to heal, which of course is the primary focus of the sutra. There's a lot of detail about the plant if anyone's interested, and I'm not going to go into detail on the herbs, but there is quite a bit of detail on that herb that's available. That is quite interesting from the perspective of Vedic medicine and how people considered or thought about Ayurveda and what was necessary for healing and what people needed. And then, of course, in the Tibetan version, you'll see these, jewels and waters of compassion and the wish-fulfilling jewel below the lotus. So that detail is there. And in the Japanese version, usually you're sitting on the lotus flower and surrounded with the halo. So just some slight differences. So because certain things are described very specifically in the sutra, and other things are left to artistic impressions, artists have a little bit of leeway, right, in terms of how they render different things. Okay, so we'll get into the actual outline of the sutra. And this is the general outline for the sutra. So this is sort of what we'll be going by. Usually when you see the sutra is in response to a question or someone requests the teaching. So in this case, the sutra is requested by the Bodhisattva Manjushri. So this is something that's somewhat different. In general, not always, but in general, when you see the Bodhisattvas requesting sutras, it's generally the Bodhisattvas recognizing a practice or teaching may be useful for humanity and requesting the teaching from the Buddhas. So we would not know of a Buddha that we have not heard of, so we wouldn't know to request the teaching. So the Bodhisattvas would say, oh, I know of a particular Buddha and their vows, and so I think that would be helpful for humanity, and as a result, they're going to request that teaching on behalf of humanity. So that's what you see in the opening part of the sutra. So we'll look into the request when we go into the sutra specifically. And then you see a list of vows, and this is perhaps the most important component of the sutra, the various vows of Medicine Buddha. And vows are, of course, very important in Buddhist practice. And here they're listed out in the sutra, so they're provided to us with some detail. So we'll go into each vow in more detail. But the vows of the Buddhas are important because this is the source of their power. So when we go into why practice a particular mantra, the mantra encapsulates the vows. So we, from a study perspective, should understand what those vows are. And from a practice perspective, we should be emulating and learning from those vows. And then likewise, as we saw in the Awakening of Faith, when we make vows, we are setting ourselves on the Bodhisattva path. So this is in part why I'm asking everyone to, if you'd like to take part in this, make a vow regarding how many times you'd like to recite the mantra. So you're making a vow to aid sentient beings. So this is the beginning of firmly setting yourself on the spiritual path. The vows perfected are what leads to the Buddha's enlightenment. So them recognizing some aspect of human suffering and making a vow to alleviate that suffering is what gets them to enlightenment. We can learn a tremendous amount from the vows. If we think we have a good handle on suffering, if we think we have a good handle on people's needs and the various manifestations of that, we will learn even more when we look into the vows. There are aspects of the vows that Buddhists make, aspects of human needs and behavior that none of us have probably all experienced, all of those things in our single lifetime. So it helps us to really see into those needs. So studying the vow is important. I want to mention at this point, at any time I teach Medicine Buddha Sutra, there are vows in the sutra that bump up against our modern sensibilities. They may initially rub us the wrong way when we read them. We may find them antiquated, sexist. That some of the descriptions we may think, is this really what the Buddhas are vowing? So we will go into in depth on this, and I'm happy to take questions, but they are far more timeless than they may seem on the surface. So we have to remember our cultural perspective, and then the overall needs of humanity. So if you read ahead, don't get turned off. I promise you there is explanation for what you're reading, and that is also the case with regard to some of the karmic consequences that are discussed in the sutra as well. So always, I will say, take care not to read things, super, super literally, or in a shallow manner. So there is going to be explanation for those vows. And if we find something in the sutra that rubs us the wrong way and makes us feel uncomfortable, write that question down. We will talk about it. The vows are in response to human needs. They are not, we're not reading a God telling us how to be, how to live. It is some human need that is seen by the Buddhas, and then there's a response to it. If we don't have the need, there's no vow about it. So, years ago, if you told me disinformation and fake news would be, one of the major problems, I would say, really? But now, of course, we need a Buddha to have a vow regarding correcting people's false impressions about things. So our needs are very complex. So their vows are there to respond. So that I want to stress. Let's see. The next part of the sutra is going to talk about the Buddha land of Medicine Buddha. So when it comes to Pure Lands, the one that the Buddhist world is most familiar with, of course, is Amida's Pure Land, the Western Paradise. This is the Eastern Pure Land, which is the Medicine Master's Pure Land. In the Sutra of the Contemplation of Amida's Pure Land, there's a very, very detailed explanation of what that Pure Land looks like, how one is reborn into it, and the merits and virtues of that Pure Land. You will find something similar in this sutra, but not as detailed. What we do get, though, is a description of what it's made of. And it's made of a substance in Sanskrit, Vaidurya, that is generally understood to be beryl. I tried to find a good picture of beryl, but the color varies. What you normally see is, I don't know how well this is going to show up, but this is lapis. So this is generally the translation that is part of the sutra, that is lapis lazuli. And lapis, let's see here, this not something that shows up so well on camera. Lapis is like a deep blue color. Hopefully that comes across. And inside the deep blue, there's sort of flecks of gold. And lapis is kind of rare. this is old lapis. It's very difficult to find high quality lapis with this kind of color. What's interesting about lapis is, well, I know a few of you probably are aware of where lapis comes from. Lapis comes from traditionally Afghanistan, in the mountains of Afghanistan area. And so the beryl itself, Vaiduria, has a spectrum of color from sort of a pale green through to emerald, and then to the deep dark blue lapis color. Yes, we have, thank you, Carlin, in the chat. So it includes emerald, aquamarine, and morganite are all beryl. So the one that's referenced here is the really dark blue color, which is oftentimes why lapis is used as a description, because you always have this dark blue. So I guess if you think about the night sky, so I'm looking out the window here in Portland, we have sun is going down, it's got a kind of a red glow still, but pretty soon we're going to have this dark blue right before it gets fully nighttime. And that's kind of the color. But as Jacob has noted in the chat, we are talking about a translucent. So here, what's being described is the light that shines out. So that light is, of course, not solid, but it is a dark blue light. So the Tibetan, let's see here. We go back up to the statuary. The Tibetan Tanka, this painting is a better quality. So this is what's coming out from the Buddha, is this light, this dark blue light. So that's how they've rendered it artistically, that the body is blue and that the light comes out. So this is a deep blue color. So the Pure Land of the Medicine Buddha has this deep blue color. I find this interesting for a few reasons. What color are hospitals usually painted? There's actually studies on this, and if you go in, the walls, especially older hospitals, were sort of a pale blue, sky blue, or some shade of blue. They would paint the hallways and the wards kind of a blue color. And there's actually studies on this. If anyone's really nerdy, they can go on PubMed and find it. It was shown to have a very calming and healing effect on people. So I always found this kind of interesting with the association with Medicine Buddha. So this is the color. One of the issues in terms of ancient times of lapis and then other gemstones to communicate the color and radiance was cutting and polishing gemstones in the old days was not as good as it is now, but lapis was closer in color and easier to get. So you could polish it and you didn't have to worry about it being clear. So lapis is also associated with Medicine Buddha. Yes, somebody mentioned that their Reiki studios blue for this reason. So yeah, it's a very calming color, and people feel a connection. So as we go through Medicine Buddha Sutra, and one of the reasons why it's very popular, of course, well, people want to be healthy, but there are health associations, especially when the sutra gets to China, that get connected to astrology and medicinal components, and the list goes on and on. So this sutra really is addressing something that is very, of course, close to us, which is our physical health. We can't study if we're not healthy. We can't help other people if we're not healthy. So the sutra recognized that this is a serious need. At any rate, this Vaiduria is technically beryl, but of the various varieties, it is a dark blue color that's being discussed. The sutra then lists out the benefits of practice. It will tell you, if you do the practice, these are the benefits you get. If you read ahead to those benefits, I will say some of them are alliteration. They are impressing upon you the benefits. One of those is, the benefit of the sutra overcomes any kind of naughty behavior. That doesn't mean you can go out and do all kinds of naughty behavior and then recite the sutra and everything's fine. So it means that the benefits of the sutra are incredibly immense. So this is one of those. It talks about overcoming black magic and all kinds of negative stuff. So it really goes in detail with regard to the benefits of the practice. And it tells you specifically how to do the practice: offering flowers, offering incense, copying the sutra, enshrining an image of the medicine Buddha. So again, we might not all have the statue, so I'm inviting everyone to kind of join us in enshrining the new statue at the temple, so that we all have that benefit that's listed in the sutra. So the benefits are enumerated. You don't have to guess. I think this is good, right? This is fair. Sometimes if you do a spiritual practice, you might say, well, you don't want to say it out loud, but you're like, what do I get out of this? Or why should I do it? Here in the sutra, you'll see it very clearly. This is why you should do it. This is the benefit. These are practical benefits. What's unique about the Medicine Buddha Sutra, and don't feel bad that these are practical benefits. They are not specifically sort of amorphous wisdom, amorphous compassion. These are also very practical benefits, things that we need. I don't know anyone who likes to be sick. I don't know anyone who wants disease. So these are things that are very practical needs for our immediate self, our immediate presence. However, those are connected to our bigger spiritual goals. So we're almost 2 years into this pandemic, and all manner of things have been disrupted. People's studies are disrupted. People's ability to come to the temple is disrupted. So if we do find ourselves in the middle of a pandemic, we can't actually fully practice because of sickness. So it's logical that we need these practical benefits. Of course, you're not going to find frivolous benefits in here. It's not the Oprah Winfrey Show, everybody gets a new car type of benefit. But there are practical things that we need in order to do any kind of spiritual practice, in order to get out of samsara. And I think that's something the Medicine Buddha specifically saw, and that's why you see the vow associated with it. So those benefits are there. I'll put this outline back up. Let's see. So number 5 was practice and benefit. So personally, I think it's only fair if a text recommends the practice, it says, oh, you should do this. It's only fair if we ask why, that the text gives you that answer. So that's what you'll find in the 5th section. Next, of course, the text, and again, remember this was originally oral teaching. So what you're seeing is a mix of what the Buddha specifically stated, and then the understanding of the oral tradition. The need to develop belief or faith in the sutra. Developing faith is not easy, but the sutra encourages this. One thing I want to recognize or point out about faith in Buddhism in general, or when the sutra says to have faith in it, the Buddha gets no benefit from our faith, right? So it's not have faith in me because I'm awesome and that makes me feel good, or build my ego, or some weird kind of scenario there. Rather, it's a benefit to us. So the encouragement to have faith is to strengthen our own practice, to keep us safe, so that we have the benefits from doing the practice, not that the speaker of the sutra is benefited. So that's, I think, really different, or should be pointed out. The vows of the medicine Buddha are compassionate vows to aid you, not the other way around. So the development of faith, or having belief or faith in the sutra, is understanding the vows, gaining that insight, doing the practice, and then it is a cycle. Doing the practice, gaining deeper insight into the vows, building our own compassion. As a result, we build faith. Right? So by building faith in the sutra doesn't mean you have faith in the book as a set of pages. Rather, you have faith in the instruction. Right? You rely on the instructions. The next section is a whole section on saving people at the time of death. So this is perhaps, if you think about the various vows of healing, yes, the sutra promises that people will be healed through the practice. However, there is a limit to our lifespan. And there will be some of us who are, at that moment where we're at the end of our lifespan, or, the medical help has come too late, right? So this is important to recognize, even in our current pandemic. Right, the best medicine, of course, is not to get sick. Second is to be vaccinated so that your body can fight off the infection. And then the medical treatment that you receive is more beneficial. Those who, sadly have not been vaccinated or couldn't be vaccinated, those are most of the people who are hospitalized now. For many of them, the medical care is too late or not sufficient. So they find themselves at that stage. At some point, we will all find ourselves there, or we will know people who are, on the doorway of death. So this whole section is, saving people. How do we do practice for those who are dying? And I think this is really necessary because, as we'll see when we look into the vows, part of suffering, part of the difficulty with regard to death and dying, is that we feel helpless, right? What can I do? So the sutra is, this teaching goes both directions. How do you practice for others? And then also, how do you address that feeling of helplessness? So if you are empowered with something to do, you don't feel as helpless. We will all grieve the passing of those that we care for. But I think sometimes our grieving is worse when we feel that we didn't do enough, couldn't do enough, we didn't know what to do. So this section is focused on that. Right? How do we actually help others? Can we benefit people who are close to death? And the sutra spells out, in detail how the various benefits that are obtained by those who do the practice and for whom the practice is done. Put the outline back. And then this is a little unusual, but it lists the various kinds of untimely death. So untimely death here, it shouldn't, in the West, we don't talk about death and dying as often. So I don't want it to come across as morbid. It's more an aspect of, this is something we shouldn't avoid. So why would untimely death be a concern? It's untimely death that we find the most tragic, when people seem to die before their time. And so the sutra goes into the various types of untimely death and their cause. Part of this is for us to get an insight into why these things happen, because that's one of the times that we search around for answers, and they're not always forthcoming. So here's where we find that. And again, the sutras are spoken in response to real human need. And this is a real human need, right? When someone dies early, we ask, we scream out, we mourn, why? Why did this happen? And so the sutra actually has that detail. It's also a caution for all of us. And by all of us, I don't mean just 14 of us online tonight, but all of humanity, as to what should we avoid if we want to avoid an untimely death. Again, no one wants to be sick. I don't know anyone who wants an untimely death. So how do we avoid that? When I was in high school, it was very common. You'd hear somebody came back from a party, they were drinking, and they wrecked their car and they died, right? This untimely death. This is a very common thing. I think it's less common now. People have stopped. Well, they have Uber and Lyft and these kind of things. But it was sort of the height of the Mothers Against Drunk Driving and things like that. So you had these untimely deaths, and people really were hurt by them, right? There was this deep feeling of why did this happen? Why were young people being taken away too soon? And so this untimely death component is really helping us recognize the preciousness of human life, because untimely death, again, cuts off our ability to practice. If we've planted seeds and good roots, and then our death is untimely, we don't see those things come to fruition. We don't see the outcome of our practice. So it's something we want to avoid. So that's covered in quite detail in the sutra. Again, very unusual. This is packed full of very practical teaching. And then also, of course, they're listed in the sutra the two bodhisattvas that assist the medicine Buddha. So we'll talk about those, and you'll find those in the iconography also. So when we get to that part of the sutra, I'll point it out, because there's some really interesting things and then some fun things that show up there. And then it lists the 12 great yaksha generals. And these are the generals that command yakshas. So what the heck are yakshas? They are incredibly fierce creatures. So sometimes they're translated as demons. They're not exactly demons. They're very fierce, supernatural. I guess in our Western thinking, it would be sort of demigods. And the 12 generals command these armies of yakshas. There's a infinite ways that this is interpreted and understood culturally. So we will go into some of that at that time. I will say at the outset, the number 12 is associated with the cycle of years, right? So in the Chinese calendar, it's a 12-year cycle. And the same with the times of day. There's 12 hours in the day rather than 24 hours in our thinking. And so the various yaksha generals are in command, and it's understood, came to be understood as connected with astrology. And in the East, your health condition is also associated with your time of birth. And so this was there's different levels within this listing, the 12 yaksha generals, in terms of medicine Buddha commanding them with regard to people's health and well-being and the outcome of illness. So we'll talk about it a little bit. Suffice to say, there's a tremendous amount of detail, and there's a lot of ritual practice. There was a time in especially Chinese and Japanese history when you could go to the temple and have this ritual performed for you to either overcome illness or overcome negative astrological things that might lead to illness. So that is included. The most important thing, though, and what the sutras really focused on is that the 12 yaksha generals will protect the person who upholds the sutra. So how do you get protection? If we're worried about different things, how is the temple protected? These kind of things. The yaksha generals are there to pledge their support to those who practice the sutra, uphold the sutra, copy it, who do the practice, and then you gain their protection. So this is the bouncers at the door, your security team. So this is listed out. So they are depicted in art. They look pretty fearsome. So it's not so bad to have some tough guys around to protect you. If they look tough enough, then nobody messes with you. So there's no need for violence. That's always good. And then the sutra concludes. This is anticlimactic. There's a conclusion of the sutra, so it goes in. So this is the basic outline. Here, I couldn't find a really good photo. I visited Shinyakushi, this temple, but you can't take photos inside. But here you can sort of see depicted in the armor one of the generals. And so at that temple, it's very interesting. It's three-dimensional. They have the 12 generals arranged around the statue of the Buddha. So there's another one here, and you can see the back of another one here. So all 12 are arranged around like they're protecting Medicine Buddha. So he has Secret Service detail, right? You can see this in the, and then this are the two bodhisattvas that flank Medicine Buddha, Sunlight Bodhisattva and Moonlight Bodhisattva. Nikko Gakko Bodhisattva. So these are the two that you'll see. I believe there are a lot of temples that have this arrangement with the two bodhisattvas. The 12 generals is a little less common, sometimes, especially not this size, but you may see them as smaller statuary, something like that. Oh, Christina, thank you. That website has some good pictures on mark. They have some good photos of the different generals. The website that Christina shared, it's a good starting point. I will say not everything on that website is accurate, so just keep that in mind. The author has done a tremendous job putting everything together and making a resource, but not everything there is very accurate, and some of the descriptions are sort of just sort of scratching the surface. So don't take that as a kind of be all end all for the art iconography or meaning. And also when it comes to a lot of the mantras, I find that many of them are incorrect, but that's probably not the author's fault. The sources for those are fairly obscure, and it's very popular right now in Japan to publish sort of interest magazines with this kind of information, and drawing from those, it doesn't always end up with a lot of accuracy. So just so people are aware. If you're come across something that's very puzzling, just needs more research. So, but amazing resource. I'm amazed that one person put all of that together. So let's see. So this is today, I just wanted to kind of go over the outline. So before I go any farther, are there any questions? Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a phenomenal picture. Yes, Karim, thank you. That is a great photo of the dual generals. Yeah, if you take a look at that photo, you can see these guys look pretty, they're ready for business, and they look pretty tough. So this is one of those areas where what's really great, the descriptions in the sutra are not very specific. So the artists get a lot of sort of artistic license to create them. So it's very interesting to see a lot of what they come up with. Yes, Jacob, you had a question? No? Okay. Oh, typed question. Okay. So is it appropriate place to ask what instance we Oh, the sutra says incense, so whatever you have available would be fine. At higher levels of practice, we do sometimes use different incense for different rituals, but for this, whatever you have available is completely okay. Again, we are offering the incense to the Buddha. They are not, going to respond differently if we use the finest incense or whatever is locally available. So again, depending on where you live, when I was if you go to Hawaii, you can buy incense and Buddhist altar supplies at the grocery store, right? Because there's a large number of people buying those things on a regular basis, and so it's mainichiko, the daily incense or everyday incense that is used. So whatever you have available, the primary thing is that you're actually offering. So it's your action that's important. This is also the case for the mantra. If you recite the mantra, the sutra says it should be single-mindedly reciting the mantra. This is also the case with the Amida Sutra. It's single-minded recitation, which means meditated recitation, not oh, how many more of these do I have to go? Oh, I've got to pick up groceries later. I'm really busy. I'm so tired, I've been doing this for a long time. It's not that type of, oh, I wonder what's for dinner. That's not single-minded practice. So if you recite, please try to stay focused, not distracted. If you find, you get to the end and you're like, oh, how many did I do? Oh, what day is it? Or, then maybe start over. So you want to be single-minded, focused, right? Focus on the actual practice. And this is why I wanted to go over the iconography. So you have in mind, the color of the Buddha. So you should be visualizing that the body is blue. It's very sort of brilliant, dark blue. That he's holding this medicine pot. That the mudra is one of, giving us fearlessness, and have these things in mind as we're reciting. And yes, I will go over the mantra next. I just want to make sure we didn't miss any major questions. So. Oh, so there's a question that's recently someone got upset on a Reddit discussion about mercy killing because of Buddhism not considering it an actual solution to suffering. Anything in the sutra related to mercy killing? Well, that's very interesting. Specifically, I don't think you're going to find mercy killing in the sutra because it's still killing. So we should avoid mercy killing. In fact, the medical oaths, require you that you not engage in that practice. So doctors shouldn't technically be doing that. What we have to look at, though, is in modern medicine, many of our interventions medically are extending people's lives beyond what would normally be the case, far beyond. So then we have to unintervene, right? A lot of life support keeps people alive way, way, way beyond when they should. So as we do this, that might be a good conversation in terms of advanced directives and how much care do people want, and making those decisions early, because we are at a place in human society where it is possible to extend life far beyond what the body can actually do. And we have people where machines are keeping them alive, so the cells are still going, but they should be they would have died naturally. So we should think about when those things are used. Some of this gets into medical ethics and specifics. My general response would be also first, I would say internet conversations tend to be discussed in terms of absolutes. So people oftentimes pose questions because they already have an answer in mind and they just want to be validated. So I would say keep that in mind. Second, here in Oregon, for example, we have death with dignity law. So people can choose to die. The only way you can choose that, however, is if you have a terminal diagnosis and you have to be within a few weeks of dying. And then I believe it's the patient's choice. Somebody can correct me if they know differently, but the physician's not administering the killing. They're given drugs, and I believe if the patient is able, if they still have that motor skill, they're allowed to self-administer. That is one option. It is not common, right? You need to be. A few years ago, there was a young woman who had a terminal illness, and her state didn't allow this. And so she moved to Oregon, changed her residency, so she was eligible for the law. And then, we're talking about a few weeks difference in terms of lifespan. So the law doesn't give you a tremendous amount of, leeway here. But removing someone from life support is different because, we as human beings have intervened in the lifespan of a person to keep them alive unnaturally. So I guess technically they've already died. We are keeping the body from fully dying. So there's a lot of nuance here. I think what people in their mind think of as mercy killing, what does that mean? Like, when do you get to do that? Do you want to be mercifully killed if you lose the use of your legs? Like, that's not in the law, and that would just be murder. So I think it's not really an actual conversation. It's not an actual choice for many people. Yes, I think Kelly, thank you. You need 2 doctors to chime in. And the patient can self-administer or be able to speak and state what they want or drink the medicine. The MD's Hippocratic Oath, I believe, mentions this, and then osteopathic physicians, DOs, is actually in their oath that you will not administer life-ending drugs, even if the patient asks it of you. That's actually in their oath. So general caveat, a lot of internet conversations, people get mad for no reason. So yes, yeah. Two doctors, thank you, Kelly. Two doctors are prescribing two different medicines, and then the patient takes it. So there's no actual killing on behalf of the doctor. Yeah, there's a lot to discuss. I don't have, all the answers. We have opinions. At any rate, these are things that we should try to, I think the sutra does address it in terms of untimely death, right? We're trying to avoid untimely death. So the question would be, when is it timely? So that's a bit open to interpretation. We'll go over the mantra next before, and I'll say the what we're going to look at is the what we call the heart mantra for the Medicine Buddha, and then there is a longer dharani that's given in the sutra. So that is in the text. There's different ways of pronouncing it. Every Buddhist country does it in their local language. So if you go to China, they're reciting it in Chinese. In Japan, they're reciting in Japanese. Vietnamese temples are reciting it in Vietnamese. The sutra makes it clear how the mantra is given, and we'll go over that chapter. But the mantra is given directly from the Buddha's light. So the meaning, the purpose of the mantra is to focus on the vows and intention of healing in the various ways described. So the mantra in Japanese is Om Koro Koro Sandari Matogi Sawaka. And it comes from the Sanskrit Om Huru Huru Chandali Matagi Swaha. This is a case where certain aspects of the mantra can be directly translated. Others can't, because mantras are oftentimes word fragments that come from Sanskrit, and they don't operate linguistically the same way that English does. So it's not always possible to translate them. So for now, the koro koro is directly related to healing, which is directly related, of course, to the vows of the Buddha. So the key is the mantra here is operating as if you are calling on the Buddha. And as the sutra makes clear, you are calling on the vows, and the response is provided in part by the yaksha generals. So the key here is focused calling, not perfect pronunciation. Why do I say that? Because people are practicing this in Chinese and it's pronounced totally differently, and they're getting results. They practice it in Sanskrit initially. When Buddhism sort of left India, people were no longer reciting it in Sanskrit. They were reciting it in other languages. They were still benefit. So the key, as is made clear in the sutra, is focus. So this is one of the key components, is the focus, not perfect pronunciation. If you mispronounce someone's name, they are still going to recognize that you're calling their name. So that's why the mental focus is important. So you're not, watching the clouds and reciting. You're trying to focus. So keeping in mind the image of the medicine Buddha. So Zoom is no good for group recitation practice. So I apologize. You'll just have to listen to me recite. And then if you'd like, you can recite with me. And then we'll talk a little bit more. So Om Koro Koro Sundari Matogi Soaka. 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 When you're reciting, you can start off reciting out loud for a while. Then you can begin to recite almost like a whisper, so you don't have to do it out loud so everyone is hearing. You can also recite silently. So you can do the first few Om Koro Koro Sundari Matogi Swaka, 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 Om Koro Koro Sundari Matogi Swaka. And then it may become a whisper, where it's just for yourself, you can hear it, but your lips are hardly moving, or it's not really leaving your mouth as you recite. You want to stay engaged though with the practice. So if you have a juzu, any type, what you have available. If you have the Shingon style, that's good. If you don't, if there's just a mala or something that you have available, that's okay. If you have, the wrist beads, you can use those. Count how many beads you have, and this is one time where we're actually going to be keeping count. So if you have the Shingon style, it has tassels, and the tassels are meant to help you count up to 10,000. So every time you go around, you move the beads so that you say 100, 200, 300. And then when you do 1,000, now over here, okay, I've done 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. So this would help you keep track of however many you've done. So generally when we do formal practice, we're going to do 108 or 1,000 or 10,000 times. When we do the service as a group, we may only recite 3 times. But that's primarily, as a group practice, people want to go home and go grocery shopping and things like that later. So we try to keep it somewhat reasonably length. So whatever you decide the length of however many you want to do, then you can keep track. Again, if you have the Shingon style, there are counter beads that are smaller, so you can count to 7, and then 21 by feel, and then of course all the way around is 108. So yes. Someone asked what's it called. It's called the Juzu or Nenju. Either way, Juzu is I think a more proper translation of mala, and Nenju, nen in Japanese is to contemplate or recite. So you or worship, nen. So you're reciting, contemplating. It also, that contemplation or seeing is why the sutra says you should contemplate or have single-minded focus. So you're trying to contemplate as you recite. So then, this is the prayers. Om Koro Koro Sendari Matogi Soaka, 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 Om Koro Koro. I timed myself doing just 108, and it took about 2.5 minutes. This speed. Om Koro Koro Sendari Matogi Soaka, Om Koro Koro Sendari Matogi Soaka, Om Koro Koro Sendari Matogi Soaka. So if you go slower, which is okay, there's no requirement that you go Om Koro Koro Sendari Matogi Soaka. Om Koro Koro Sendari Matogi Soaka. 100 times, this is no more than 3 minutes. So my request, decide how many you want to do, or you think you can do each day, and then keep track. So maybe index card, post-it note, find your notebook. Decide for yourself when you want to start. So if you are really busy tomorrow, don't make the vow that you're going to start tomorrow. Make sure you can accomplish whatever vow you make. And then next week, when we meet, you can report the number you've done. If you do 3, thank you. That is fine. If you do 30,000, that is fine. Thank you. It is not a competition. I want you to make a vow that you can keep. So if you decide, okay, I'll do 108, because since I said that takes 3 minutes, then I have 3 minutes to dedicate. The key is that you're dedicating your time for the benefit of others. Someone asked, how long should we keep the vow? I'm going to, when we get to 1 million, I will announce it. And then as a group, we can decide if we want to keep going. But right now, let's see if we can get to 1 million. Like I said, if I do 10,000 each day, it would take me 100 days. So if we all practice together, I'm fairly confident we can get to 1 million in a month and a half, 2 months. So we will keep track each week. And when we get to 1 million, I think we'll surprise ourselves. So then we can, as a group, reevaluate. But I will at first say, let's try to get to 1 million. Okay. Are there any questions so far? So this is the outline, introduction. We'll start all of us practicing together, and then we'll start the full study of the sutra next week, and then keep up our practice and study simultaneously. Jamie and I were talking about that, so we're going to keep track. So you can either email the temple, or if you'd like to put it in the chat when we start the class. If you do so, please do it privately. Don't send out to everyone. Again, we don't. Thank you. So Jamie put in the email. So events@shingonpdx.org. Subject mantra. So just report how many you've done for the week. If you forget, I'll try to mention at the beginning and end of each Thursday class to report it in whatever way is easier for you. But it's not we're not going to be comparing notes, who did more or did less, or, who forgot. That's not important. What's important is that we, as a group, do practice on behalf of everyone suffering from the pandemic. All of us are suffering from the pandemic. Right? Whether we have COVID or not, we are all suffering from the pandemic. So. Oh yes, someone noticed the yaksha general picture is really good. It's very good. I have, I think, usually when I go to the temple, so Shin Yakushiji is like a national treasure temple. They normally have art books featuring the statuary. I will try to find it. I try to buy, because you can't take photos in these temples. So I try to get the temple art books, because it's usually the only source of good quality. And all the statuaries, national treasures, and some of the best sculptors the world's ever produced. So that kind of artistic heritage is really something to share. So I'll try to see if I can find. Oh yeah, Kofukuji. Thank you, Christina. Kofukuji, I believe, also has the Yakushi Nyorai. Yeah, important cultural property. And then the generals. These are in Nara. They're very beautiful. Really, really interesting statuary. So when we can travel to Japan again, they will be on the tour list. So you can actually go visit them.
Excuse me, speaking of Nara, like, it just reminded me that when I first went to Koyasan and went to the museum there, I didn't understand any of these, to me, they were like, what are they? And all this, the statues. And then Kurt explained to me the meaning of them. And so now every time going back, it's like you just want to study them deeper and deeper. But at first, being used to Christian statues of that sort, so these heavenly guards, like, what does that have to do with Buddhism? But now I know it has.
Yeah, it definitely can be confusing when you see all this artwork out of context and with no explanation. One benefit, I think, in at least in Japan, when you go to a museum, it's actually a practice space too, so you can practice in the museum. It's not strictly something that's on display. So you can. I've seen it. You can actually sit in the museum and meditate, and the way people interact with the religious artwork is different. But yeah, there's a tremendous amount of detail, explanation, usefulness, and of course, we're not. I think this is a big misunderstanding. People see Buddhist artwork and they see people, prostrating, and they interpret it through one, like a Christian lens, where there's a worship of the actual object. There's so many more dimensions happening. So we have these as aids to practice, and we're focusing on the attributes, and we're bringing to mind the vows. So if you've learned the background and history of the different the Buddhas and their vows, then seeing the imagery like this is really a meditative aid. So someone's asking, what should we contemplate? We should try to actually visualize the Buddha, right? We should try to visualize this image. So if you have the artwork, as you're reciting the mantra, you can, actually, you're using the statuary or picture as an aid. And so as you go through the vowels, then the meaning of the medicine takes on a more much bigger, broader meaning. The idea of fearlessness, right, this mudra, you understand it more deeply. So as you contemplate that, then you're also gaining insight into the vows and the practice. And of course, again, in Japan, the preference is for plain wood and sometimes making the pot gold, but the body is blue color, so it should be visualizing this as sort of blue light. So that is the contemplation. Again, this, as a type of meditation, we will all, our focus will all waver. We will all lose focus. We may find some days are better than others. That is okay. What is important is that we try, and we come back to the practice each day. This is why I say most Buddhists don't meditate, because it's understood that meditation and visualization practice are hard. Even in Shingon, meditation is not the first step. It's one of the last steps. Recitation, reciting the sutras, reciting the mantras is the first thing you do. The deeper visualizations and meditations always come later, because they are difficult. So don't develop negative feelings about, oh, my mind wandered. It's going to wander. Just know that in advance. The key is you keep trying, and every day you try. So every day, that's why the Buddhists made vows, because they were still in training then. They weren't perfected Buddhas. So in order for me to perfect Buddhahood, I have to make these vows. This is the way I have to practice very hard to get there. So they were still practicing. So we're learning from their practice. So we need to practice. We shouldn't have any, there's no guilt or negative feelings or, oh, I did it wrong. That's not helpful. So don't make it harder for yourself. Okay, so I'll recite. I meant to add this to the outline, but I'll do it next time. So dedication of merit. So if I ask you, please put your palms together. 常人人未病の王は約千万語にも危ううことかたし、我今検問し従事することを得たり、願わく如来の真実義を下し立て祀らん。The supreme, profound, and subtle Dharma is difficult to encounter even in 100, 1,000, or 10,000 kalpas. Now I am able to see, hear, receive, and hold it. I understand the Buddha's true meaning. And we dedicate the merit of our sutra study tonight to the benefit of all sentient beings, but especially to the ongoing pandemic, so that people can be liberated from their suffering, both physical and mental. So thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. And if you want to take the challenge, the Medicine Buddha Mantra Challenge, this is going to be bigger than the cold water. What was that? Ice bucket something. Yeah. So we'll be trending. I'm just kidding. This is not going to be that cool. We don't want this going viral. The opposite. We want this going vaccinated. So, but we'll practice together. And like I said, I think as we go into the study, the vows of Medicine Buddha will, we're looking at alleviating the suffering directly of the virus, but also the other symptoms that we see in our society. There's a lot of strife, untruths, all kinds of things happening as a result. So thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Have a good weekend. I think many people are going to be off on Monday. So everyone be safe, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.